Apologies.
Yes.
I can't see the flashing light.
That's okay. Thank you, Mr. Hetler. Got it. We appreciate your testimony. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questions. I'd like to thank our witnesses today for your testimonies and the suggestions that you have brought before this committee. I'd also like to thank Chairman Comer for this opportunity to chair the Historic Oversight Subcommittee on DOGE. Americans are shocked to learn that $2.7 trillion of their hard-earned tax dollars have been stolen or wasted in improper payments since 2003. You see, in the private sector, companies can't continue to run if they keep employees that allow waste and abuse with their resources. But that has continued for decades here in the federal government. Mr. Talcove, do private sector companies have a lower rate of improper payments than the federal government?
Yes, the fraud rate that the criminals are taking advantage of in the public sector is around 20%. In the private sector, it's around 3%, and it's really because the tools that are used in the private sector aren't used in the public sector. Front-end identity verification, self-certification, and then finally making sure that individuals are who they say they are. If we start using these tools, you will see the fraud rate go down dramatically, because for the most part, this fraud isn't taking place by real individuals. It's individuals whose identities have been stolen on the dark web. They use that information pretending to be somebody else, and because of the antiquated systems, processes, and technologies in place in government programs, they're able to steal at scale.
Right. So, Mr. Talcove, we would say that private companies that pretty much have to exist on a 20% profit rate, they are not allowed. They can't continue to be successful if they were to allow their customers' data to be stolen like that and used by criminals. However, the federal government, who can continue printing checks and continue in operation, never fixes its problems because it can't be forced to go out of business. Would you agree with that? Yes or no?
Yes. One of the things I noticed during COVID was the criminals learned that government was the mark because it never runs out of money. And they focus on it at scale, and then the likelihood of getting caught is virtually zero.
I think it's outrageous for Americans to know that their identity can be stolen and then used for child trafficking, drug trafficking, and terrorism, like you stated in your opening statement. Ms. Royal, your testimony states that many programs operate under essentially an honor system in which applicants need not verify their identity, income, residency, or other key eligibility factors. You call this a trust everyone instead of a trust by verify approach. Does this mean the federal government in some states are giving out billions of dollars to individuals without verifying who they are or whether they meet program eligibility requirements?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
That's outrageous. Do states have enough incentive to prevent fraud and to recover improper payments?
No, and in fact, states are hesitant to spend their state dollars to protect federal dollars.
Would greater investment in program integrity efforts yield a positive return for taxpayers?
Yes, it could easily be self-funding.
Amazing. Mr. Whitson, your testimony states that both the Biden and Obama administrations issued rules and guidance that made it harder for states to verify eligibility for Medicaid. You say that repealing Biden's Medicaid streamlining rule would save $164 billion over 10 years because the rule restricts eligibility verification that states can perform. Can you explain why this rule is so costly?
Yeah, so the rule does a number of things, but for instance, it prohibits states from verifying eligibility more than once a year. So for non-disabled folks to just go in and look and say, hey, are you still eligible for the program? It says you are forbidden from doing that any more often than once a year. And so obviously people's lives change, and so they may become ineligible, and so it's designed to keep them on the program. Another thing, it prohibits in-person or phone interviews to verify their identity. So people apply for it, and then the person on the other end says, well, I just want to call and make sure this is a real person, not someone in another country or whatever. The rule prohibits that. And so there's a number of other provisions. It also opens a lengthy reconsideration periods. And this is where illegal immigrants are able to obtain the benefits. And so basically it says once you get, these benefits, you can't interfere with it for a 90-day period or longer. And so there's a number of horrible things. But.
So we can't verify if someone is illegal or legal receiving benefits. Just to correct that, yes or no?
You have to wait a state has to wait at least 90 days. And actually what we're seeing is it's led some states to wait as long as 13 years. And so on the part.
Unbelievable. My time has expired. Thank you very much. I now recognize Mr. Lynch from Massachusetts for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
The chair recognizes Ms. Greene of Georgia for 5 minutes for questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Wojcicki, sorry, apologize. You co-founded 23andMe in 2006 and took the company public in 2021. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And this is all about DNA, which is we would call science. Is that right?
It was really about how individuals can learn about their own genetic information.
But DNA and the study of it is science. Is that correct?
It's about learning about their family, their ancestry, science, and their health risks.
Okay, so it's science. Now, in 2001, you reposted Dr. Raven, the science maven, who reposted my post of a sign that I kept outside of my office that said there are two genders, male and female, trust the science. And the attack on this, which you reposted, so you must have agreed with them, was as a scientist with a transgender parent, I need you to sit down. You don't know the science or the history. You trust the science. Science draws a difference between sex at birth and gender identity. The systematic incidentalization of gender is a product of colonization. What does colonization have to do with gender?
I haven't seen that in a long time. I don't actually.
You reposted it, though, so you must have known something about it. Also, 23andMe, the company that you led at the time, or that you're still there and you're trying to buy, opponents of trans rights use the phrase, trust the science, to make false claims about sex and gender. We support what the science actually says. Accepting and affirming trans people has a positive impact on their health. Trust the science, support trans health, which is really interesting because in DNA, it shows that there's only two sexes, two genders, male and female, and that should be something that you're you're very tied into that since you founded the company, co-founded the company, took it public, and you want to buy it again. So it's baffling that 23andMe, a company that specializes in DNA and people's very personal information and how God has designed human beings, would support and continue to support the trans ideology that this is something that can be changed. Have you ever seen any DNA or know of DNA that a biological male can give birth to a baby?
No.
No. So this is something that we know cannot be changed. That's scientific. That's the design of our DNA. And I don't understand, and I think most people don't understand, why 23andMe would take such a hard left political position supporting trans rights. And here's what's the really weird part about it, is it says this is one of the many reasons why we've been working to improve our products for trans and non-binary customers. I thought your product is helping people understand their DNA, linking themselves with family trees. So I can't comprehend what kind of product 23andMe could give to people who identify themselves in some other way. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Another thing that's hard to understand is, the beauty of DNA is it's the beautiful design. It's God's design down to the finest detail, a granular level of how we're made, but it also helps people link with their family trees. Yet this is a letter that you put out after the SCOTUS ruling overturning Roe versus Wade, and you put out a letter very much against the ruling. that the right should go back to the states. And you clearly put your own personal belief in here on the 23andMe social media that you are very much for the killing of the unborn, the killing of babies, which completely would destroy what your company is all about. How can we study DNA? How can we study people's lineage if one of the very co-founders and who wants to own the company again supports the murder of the unborn, the murder of God's design, and the murder of God's creation, which we can link it to DNA. And Mr. Chairman, I'm running out of time, but I think that's 100% against the science, and I think it's 100% against God. I yield back.
Look forward to your questions.
I now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questioning. The American people definitely support nonprofits, and but what they don't support is corruption, waste, fraud, and abuse. In 2024, right as the Biden administration was leaving office, the Democrats finalized the awards that amounted to $20 billion under its greenhouse gas reduction slush fund to launder government funding to 8 politically aligned nonprofits, several of which were newly created solely to join in on the massive grift. One of these awardees is Power Forward. Mr. Turner, you've spent a lot of time diving into leftist green NGOs. Was the NGO Power Forward just created a couple of years ago, yes or no?
Yes.
In fiscal year 2023, did Power Forward report only $100 in revenue on their 990 financial disclosure form?
Yes.
Was Power Forward slated to receive $2 billion in federal funding?
Yes, that's 20 million times revenue.
Is it commonplace for completely new nonprofits with zero track record to receive a multi-billion-dollar grant from the federal government?
There is no private entity that would give an organization 20 million times revenue after a few months of creation. Only government is stupid enough to do that.
That's right. There's no business in America could get that loan from a bank. Is Rewiring America part of the same NGO coalition as Power Forward?
Part of the same coalition, yes.
Did Rewiring America hire Stacey Abrams?
She's affiliated with the organization. It's unclear in what capacity, but yes.
Is she an energy expert?
No.
So it's pretty eye-opening that a brand new politically connected group got such a massive federal grant. Rewiring America hired Stacey Abrams, as far as we know, a twice-failed candidate for Georgia governor and well-known Democrat activist, even though she has little to no knowledge of energy policy. But the leader of Power Forward praised Abrams for playing a pivotal role in securing these billions. Notably, Abrams' PAC spent over $126 million on Democrat campaigns over the last 5 years. This recirculation of taxpayer funds literally is the Democrats' circle of life. Mr. Krikorian, we witnessed the worst border immigration catastrophe under the Biden administration. It seems to me that many immigration-oriented NGOs have double-dipped their hands in taxpayer money. My first question is, how influential were the American taxpayer-funded NGOs at facilitating the movement of illegal aliens to and through our country's borders?
Extremely influential. Now, some of this would have happened anyway because of the Biden administration's invitation to mass illegal immigration. But the invitation required some means of this happening, some means of doing it. And so what it did is the taxpayer money essentially turned the illegal immigration crisis up to 11. It would have existed otherwise, but it was significantly magnified by this government funding.
By the Biden's administration policies.
Right.
You've mentioned that the United Nations pay psychologists to help illegal aliens reverse asylum denials on appeal. Specifically, tax dollars go to the UN, which directs and pays psychologists to help illegal aliens unearth repressed memories of torture, persecution, and human rights violation so that they can legally claim asylum. Is this an intentional effort to subvert our immigration laws by creating fake narratives for asylum seekers?
I can't put myself into someone else's head, but I can't imagine any other plausible way to describe it. And initially, just to be clear, they used this to get Mexican asylum, which they use as a kind of trampoline to get to the United States, and then present those repressed memory documents as part of their evidence when they are in removal proceedings as part of their asylum claims.
And do they provide legal help to apply for asylum claims?
That's inside the United States, so that's beyond the scope of my testimony here.
Thank you. Mr. Walter, you've been investigating NGO funding sources for a long time. Do you know of other examples of former elected or appointed officials in the NGO sector securing significant federal tax dollars through grants or contracts?
We've had mentioned here the $2 billion slush fund, and of course, the OMB and HUD director, Sean Donovan, has been mixed up in that. And then, of course, there have been public reports as well about the millions of dollars that the wife of Senator Sheldon Whitehouse has received from NGOs whose legislation he's helped push.
Yeah, thank you. My time has expired, and thank you all for being here. I now recognize Ranking Member Stansbury for 5 minutes of questions. This hearing of the Subcommittee on Delivering on Government Efficiency will come to order. Welcome, everyone. Without objection, the chair may declare a recess at any time. I recognize myself for the purpose of making an opening statement. Good morning. At the DOGE subcommittee, we are continuing our war on waste. That means rooting out spending that is unnecessary, wasteful, and frankly un-American. Today, we are looking at the more than $500 million federal taxpayers spend annually to fund public radio and television. A big chunk of this subsidy flows to National Public Radio and Public Broadcasting Service. NPR and PBS are the big DC-based entities that create and distribute much of the news and educational content heard and seen on public radio and TV stations across the country. When Congress adopted the Public Broadcasting Act of 1967, it did so because it thought at the time that federal dollars were needed to provide objective news and education content to the entire nation, including rural residents who lived off the grid. Fast forward a few decades, and a lot has changed. The invention of the internet, for instance, and social media. It's made news and information widely available to those living in remote areas. Americans are increasingly consuming digital media and podcasts. The audience of public radio and television is declining. And I know this because I represent a rural district where farmers listen to podcasts and internet-based news while they drive their tractors. At the same time, NPR and PBS have increasingly become radical left-wing echo chambers for a narrow audience of mostly wealthy, white, urban liberals and progressives who generally look down on and judge rural America. PBS News is not just left-leaning, but it is actively uses taxpayer funds to push some of the most radical left positions, like featuring a drag queen on the show Let's Learn, a show targeted toward young children ages 3 to 8 years old. I want you to know I grew up watching children's programming on PBS. And as a mother who raised 3 children, I felt confident that I could leave the room while my own children were watching children's programming on PBS. But I can tell you right now, Ms. Kruger, specifically, as a mother, if I had walked in my living room or one of my children's bedrooms and seen this child predator and this monster targeting my children, I would become unglued. And that is how most parents feel all over this country. This is not the only example of them sexualizing and grooming children. They've been doing it for over the last decade. In 2015, PBS produced Frontline, put out a documentary, Growing Up Trans, that takes viewers on an intimate and eye-opening journey inside the struggles and choices facing transgender kids and their families. This means that PBS is one of the founders of the trans child abuse industry, all while taking taxpayer money. Brainwashing and transing children is an issue so hated by parents across the country that it was a driving force in the landslide Republican and Trump victory in the 2024 election cycle and presidential race. The news that these entities produced is either resented or increasingly tuned out and turned off by most of the hardworking Americans who are forced to pay for it. They no longer view NPR and PBS as trusted news sources.
Chair, now recognize Ms. Greene for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. I'm glad this committee's first hearing is dealing with the federal workforce. Government accountability needs to start with federal employees. And if you ask any American, they'll tell you straight to your face, they are not happy with the federal workforce. This Congress, I will be chairing the subcommittee on delivering on government efficiency. We will be working closely with the Trump administration and its DOGE effort to make our government more efficient, more cost-effective, and more accountable. During President Trump's first term, federal employees tried to undermine the America First agenda at every turn. The swamp was hard at work, not for the American people, but indeed to subvert their will. Make no mistake, they will attempt to do the same this term. A new poll that nearly half of all federal employees plan to resist Trump. It shows this includes 73% of Democrat federal employees. This is totally unacceptable. Unelected bureaucrats do not have a mandate from the American voters. President Trump does. And President Trump is the incoming president starting on Monday. This means that the unelected bureaucrats that work for the federal government will come into place, and they will come to heel to the American people that have delivered the mandate. Again, President Trump was elected to put the federal bureaucracy in its place, and that includes back in the office. However, Mr. O'Malley signed a contract on his way out the door of the Social Security Administration to stifle President Trump's authority over the federal workforce. This locks in telework policies from the Biden era. Mr. O'Malley left his job as head of the Social Security Administration in late November to run to be chairman of the DNC. But right before he did, he gave a parting gift to his friends, his buddies, who run the largest federal employee union. He signed a contract with the American Federation of Government Employees that ensures Biden-era telework levels for tens of thousands of Social Security employees until 2029. Keep in mind, this was the union he was supposed to be negotiating against, not for. As commissioner of the Social Security Administration, Mr. O'Malley was supposed to be serving the American taxpayers who paid his salary. Instead, he worked for the union that endorsed him for his job. And while Mr. O'Malley was signing off on this contract to allow public servants to continue to work from home, the union he negotiated the deal for was starting to send their own employees back to their own offices in Washington. Unfortunately, this hypocrisy is nothing new from the Democrats and their special interest, and it is certainly something my subcommittee will work with President Trump to crack down on. I'm thankful to Chairman Comer that we are starting this work today. It is also absurd that taxpayers are literally paying federal employees to do business for their own unions. In other words, when unelected bureaucrats are supposed to be working for the American people, they are instead doing work for their unions. The Biden administration has refused to publish totals for the use and cost of official time, which prior administrations released every year. However, based on available data, we can assume $200 or $300 million are being spent annually on official time. That's $2 or $3 billion over a decade that Americans are paying for unelected bureaucrats to not do their job. As I work with DOGE on cost-cutting ideas, official time will be among the many items on the list. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentlelady,
Yields. I now recognize the gentlelady from Georgia, Ms. Greene, for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I get into some questions, I'd just like to point out that, Mr. Wales, in your testimony, you talked about Iran's cyber hacking attempts against President Trump's campaign this past election cycle, aimed at undermining President Trump's candidacy and sowing discord within the United States electoral process. So thank you for pointing that out. While cyber threats from our foreign adversaries must absolutely be protected against, we also can't forget that our own independent cybersecurity agency, CISA, was more focused on conducting its own large-scale election interference campaign through its censorship laundering complex against our own people, rather than bolstering our cybersecurity efforts and working to protect our critical infrastructure. Just some brief stats. The average cost of a data breach in the U.S. amounts to $9.36 million, almost double that of the global average. As you, Mr. Montgomery, testified, the FBI received reports of $12.5 billion in cybercrime losses in the United States in 2023, an increase of nearly 20% over 2022, which is definitely alarming. Ransomware attacks rose 74% from 2022 to 2023. Cyber attacks on critical infrastructure globally increased 30% in 2023. 1 in 3 Americans, and this is shocking, were affected by healthcare data breaches last year. Government agencies were the third most targeted sector from ransomware attacks in 2023, and there are roughly 500,000 vacant cybersecurity jobs in the United States, Mr. Chairman. That is a serious issue. Most cyber attacks fall into a never-ending pattern. A threat actor, often sponsored by a nation-state, exploits vulnerabilities in the system. They exfiltrate sensitive data or encrypt it for ransom. Then there is an investigation into how it happened, who was involved, and what measures should be taken to prevent it from happening again. And then it happens again and the cycle repeats, and we're all in a very serious dilemma. Mr. Montgomery, in your testimony, you talk about some specific offensive and defensive solutions that we can take to address the needs of our cybersecurity shortfalls. Could you elaborate a little more on that, please?
Sure, thank you. I would highlight in that first, we absolutely have to invest in our sector risk management agencies to make sure they're doing their job. It's shocking sometimes when you look at a Department of Energy spends what I think is probably the right amount, somewhere between $50 and $100 million a year on being a sector risk management agency, helping energy companies protect themselves. Then you go to the Department of Agriculture and they're spending $500,000, or Department of Education, they're spending $250,000. Most of us understand that's 2 full-time equivalents or 1 full-time, it's 1 human or 2 humans. And that's just website management. You're not helping the 8,000 farms and food distribution networks out there with 1 person manning a website. And you're not helping our K through 9,000 districts out there with 1 person manning a website. We need more consistent focus, leadership from the top down, cabinet members down, on cybersecurity as a responsibility they have as a cabinet member. And then, when appropriate, the funding to do that kind of thing. So to me, that's the number one. And I spoke earlier about military mobility. If I could only focus on 3 things, it would be rail, aviation, and ports. Because if we don't get that right, China, Russia, doesn't matter. If they initiate combat operations that we're going to be involved in, we won't get there fast enough.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Montgomery. I completely agree with you. Those are very critical infrastructure things that we have to protect. With AI being the biggest emerging industry in the technology industry, I'd like to ask each of you, how can we protect Americans, protect our government, protect ourselves from cyber attacks, and how do you see AI playing a role in that, maybe for the good or for the bad?
I'll start. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Myers.
Artificial intelligence can be one of the solutions to a lot of the problems that you highlighted. When we think about the cyber workforce, artificial intelligence can take more junior analysts and make them more senior analysts by automating and helping them deal with complex problems at scale and at speed. I'll also say that artificial intelligence in the security domain can be used to identify and quickly remediate these attacks. So there is a huge opportunity there. The one caution I'll say is that I think in the next 1 to 3 years, we'll be seeing more and more organizations and businesses employing their own artificial intelligence. And that will create a situation where there's what we would call AI workloads that need to be protected. So we need to be thinking about how can we proactively start talking about protecting those AI workloads today before they become a problem in the future.
That makes sense. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, can we allow our witnesses to each answer?
Very quickly, a yes, no, but that we need to move on. So if you've got a quick yes, no, you can do a quick yes, no.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming to the committee today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
The gentlelady.
I now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questions, and I thank the witnesses for their testimony. Mr. Maroney, the title of your testimony is Reducing the Government's Holdings Could Generate Substantial Savings, and I agree with that. And thanks to the Trump administration, we're finally seeing some savings, $400 million on leases, according to the administration. Do you think the government's excess properties exist in part because federal agencies and the bureaucrats who run them have no incentive to move or to give up their space? Just why won't these agencies co-locate and downsize?
So there's a number of reasons, but certainly cultural reticence to sharing space is something we've identified in the past. Also, inertia, for lack of a better word. It's a space you've already had, and there isn't as much incentive to move. It costs money to move out of space at times, and agencies haven't always put that up front. There's a number of other reasons possibly too, but certainly those are both valid reasons that they've brought up before. Those are reasons that have been brought up before.
Right, except their actions are different. They certainly were ready to jump out of this building and leased a very expensive building on Pennsylvania Avenue. Recent presidents couldn't overcome that bureaucratic inertia. Yet President Trump and DOGE ended almost 700 leases in just a few months. That's unbelievable. Has any other administration acted so quickly to reduce the federal footprint that you know of?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, that much needed though. Mr. Maroney, your testimony states that a GAO covert operation last year was successful about half the time in sneaking prohibited items past the guards and into federal buildings. I'm really interested in that. What sort of items did you sneak in? What dangers does this vulnerability pose?
Right, so we snuck in 3 different items: a multi-purpose tool with a knife, a baton, like a baton you could use to attack someone with, and pepper spray. All those are prohibited items. All those are things you could cause real harm if you wanted to. And like you said, about half the time we were able to get that through. So that raises concerns. We only did 27 tests and got through in half the time. That suggests other items could be getting through at a greater level.
But you got through half the time in 27 tests.
Correct. And that also comports with FPS's, the Federal Protective Service's own covert testing program.
Wow, that's definitely terrifying. Thank you for that. I have a lot of death threats, and several people have been convicted and served time in prison for planning to murder me. So I always appreciate the efforts on every single aspect of security to make sure that people that work within the federal government and the Capitol and visitors as well are safe. So thank you. Mr. Hart, I appreciate the work your organization has done in making the American people aware how the government spends Americans' hard-earned money, including this chart behind me here. Shows a disgusting amount of federal spending on furniture, which is what you talked about. So how did you go about finding the Biden administration spent about $1 billion per year on furniture while federal buildings sat empty during COVID and federal workers work from home?
Yeah, what we do, Chairman, is we have access to all federal spending through USAID and that's a bill that I helped pass back in 2006. So we're able to do keyword searches and look at furniture, look for vendors even, and identify and keyword search things like recliners to identify and understand how much the federal government is spending on furniture. And it's really a scope of government problem issue, as I mentioned in my opening statement, is that when we decide to have a large scope, there is going to be a big cost of furniture. So it's a very useful way to think about and assess whether we ought to have this number of federal buildings.
Yeah,
in the first
Mr. Hart,
place.
we appreciate those efforts. In 2021, the CDC spent almost $250,000 on solar-powered picnic tables. The CDC at the time was telling people to socially distance with masks and basically forcing a vaccine that many Americans didn't want. So what use would its employees have for this new picnic table that has quite the price tag?
Yeah, it's quite expensive, and the social distancing guidelines suggested they shouldn't be seated at that table while they were spending $237,000.
Look at those seats. Look at those seats. That's not social distancing.
No, they're quite close. There's a close proximity of those seats to the other person.
Yeah, real quick, I've just got
those.
short amount of time yet. I'd like to ask, just basically, just for the general audience, is $238,000 spent on solar-powered picnic tables at the CDC appropriate? I think the American people thinks that's disgusting. Is $700,000 spent by the SEC for their New York regional office conference room appropriate of taxpayer dollars? I don't think so. What about $6.5 million spent on high-end furniture to redecorate the EPE office? No. And then $284,000 in Herman Miller furniture for FEMA's headquarters conference center, an appropriate use of taxpayer dollars? I would argue not. I'm definitely over time. So thank you, gentlemen, for closing remarks. And threats against the President of the United States will not be tolerated by anyone. And the math does add up. The United States is $36 trillion in debt. $36 trillion. There's plenty of spreadsheets that show that. As a matter of fact, there's a debt clock. You can watch it continue to tick upwards every single day. In fiscal year 2024, the government spent over $1.8 trillion more than it took in. And in fiscal year 2025, the interest on our debt is expected to exceed $1 trillion. That's everybody. I don't care how you vote. The American people do not want to continue to fund these propaganda campaigns, regime changes, terrorist, LGBTQ initiatives, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and other Democrat globalist initiatives. And even if the people did want to continue supporting such causes, guess what? They can support them with their own money through private donations. Because the reality is, everyone, we are flat out broke. If the U.S. government operated like any other private business, which it should, by the way, it would be completely bankrupt and it would be out of business. Last year, we spent almost $2 trillion more than we took in. The United States government is not a charity, and it is not to be used and abused by the bureaucracy to implement the far left's agenda and impose it on the entire world. Again, 96% of all political contributions from USAID employees go to Democrat Party candidates or PACs. Perhaps that's why we're hearing all the complaining. The revolving door between USAID employees and NGOs that receive USAID funding is undeniable. Maybe we should consider investigating whether USAID funding has made it back to Democrat campaigns. Has it affected elections? The real questions the American people deserve to know answers to are these. Why are we funding 9 out of 10 news outlets in Ukraine? Why was former USAID Administrator Samantha Power visiting Hungary for the purpose of strengthening democratic institutions when Hungary is a country that is strongly democratic and members of the EU and NATO? Why was USAID co-funding joint programs with George Soros' Open Society to promote radical social agendas throughout the developing world? Why is USAID involved in the canceling of elections in Romania? Why is USAID involved in funding court changes in Albania that resulted in the prosecution of the Albanian opposition leader? Why is USAID funding censorship laws in Brazil to silence Bolsonaro? Why is USAID involved in funding the Syrian civil war? What we have learned here today is that USAID has been used as a tool by Democrats to brainwash the world with globalist propaganda to force regime changes around the world. But if USAID funded terrorism that resulted in the death of Americans, then this committee will be making criminal referrals. Lastly, if this is the funding that has come from the USAID, the United States Agency for International Development needs to be abolished. With that and without objection, all members have 5 legislative days within which to submit materials and additional written questions for the witnesses, which will be forwarded to the witnesses. If there is no further business without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned.
Without objection?
Proudly.
All right. Chair recognizes Ms. Greene.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Governor Hochul, you stated that you're a proud registered Democrat.
Yes, I did. Is that illegal now, too, in your country?
Governor Hochul, this is not a laughing matter. You also stated that you swore an oath to uphold the laws of New York. And one of the laws that you have upheld and proudly kept in place is the executive order signed by former Governor Andrew Cuomo that directs that no state officers or employees, including law enforcement officers, shall disclose information to federal immigration authorities for the purpose of federal civil immigration enforcement unless required by law. And because of your state's policies of paying for flights of illegal aliens, we ended up with Jose Ibarra in our state of Georgia. And, you know, I'm a mother of 3 children, and 2 out of my 3, I have 2 daughters. And you're a mother, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Yes, and I think you've got 2 children, you have 1 daughter, is that right?
That is correct.
And so you and I are both mothers, and there's one mother that I wish could be here today and could talk to you instead of me, and that's Allison Phillips. That's Laken Riley's mother. And we talked about Laken a few minutes ago, and you know, there's a really special bond between mothers and daughters. And we speak with our daughters daily. We speak with our daughters all day long. We speak with our daughters about every single thing that's happening in our lives and every single thing that's happening in their lives. And I want you to know the last time that Laken Riley and her mother, Allison Phillips, tried to talk to each other, and that happened to be in the morning when Laken was getting ready to go out and go for her morning jog. And on the morning of her murder, at 8:55 a.m., Riley texted her mother and said, "Good morning, about to go for a run, if you're free to talk." And I can tell you that's something I do with my girls, and they text me, and I'm sure you and your daughter text each other as well. But she didn't get her mother, and then Riley called her mother just a few minutes later at 9:03 a.m. as she was starting to listen to music, but she didn't get her mom on the phone. And the trail cam actually captured her going out for her run at 9:05 a.m. At 9:11, Laken called 911. This was just not but a few minutes after she had tried to call her mother. And then at 9:24, Laken received a call from her mother, but it went unanswered. And at 9:28, Laken's heart stopped. And according to the smartwatch, the data of her smartwatch, Laken fought for her life for 17 minutes. 17 minutes. 17 minutes, this little girl fought for her life as she was being beat in the head by this monster, as she was being strangled by this monster, as she was being almost raped by this monster and drug off into the woods. She fought for her life for 17 minutes, and her mom tried to call during that time. And it was only a few minutes after she had tried to call her mother. And I think as mothers, not politicians, this is something that we should easily share with Allison Phillips. So when we are talking about the laws in place and the policies that we uphold as elected leaders in this country, do you know who we should be thinking about? We should be thinking about our daughters. And the fact that, look, everybody can fight all day long, Democrat, Republican. I gotta tell you though, it's so much bullshit when it comes down to the fact that this little girl fought for 17 minutes of the end of her 22-year-old life. The end of her 22-year-old life. And Governor Hochul, for the love of God, as you are a proud, registered Democrat, I don't know how on earth you can uphold laws that protect and give aid and comfort to monsters, especially one that was arrested in your state and let go because of your policies in your state. And I can't comprehend it, Mr. Chairman, just one more second. Laken Riley and her mother deserve to have one last chat. Like, you know what? Me and you get to have chats with our daughters. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Yield back. They've called votes. We're going to try to get 2 more questions in. I'll recognize Mr. Davis from Illinois, and then
This hearing of the Subcommittee on Delivering on Government Efficiency will come to order. Welcome, everyone. Without objection, the chair may declare a recess at any time. I recognize myself for the purpose of making an opening statement. Welcome, everyone, to today's DOGE Subcommittee hearing on federal real estate. This is an area where the Trump administration is taking long overdue action. The federal government owns a massive real estate portfolio of more than 250,000 buildings. No one knows how much of this real estate is actually being put to use or what it's worth on the open market. Here's what we do know. Taxpayers spend about $10 billion annually just to operate and maintain all of it. American taxpayers have been drowning in debt, inflation, unaffordable grocery prices, high interest rates, and have been suffering to get by. All while the federal government is pouring billions of dollars into wasteful, empty office buildings and luxurious high-end furniture, which they, the American taxpayers, can't even afford themselves. It's quite a hypocrisy. These buildings sat largely empty during the entire Biden administration, which kept federal office workers at home long after the COVID-19 pandemic ended. By the way, truck drivers, first responders, so many people worked during the pandemic, but federal workers could stay home, and these federal buildings sat empty. Here in D.C., GAO found in 2023 that the vast majority of federal agency headquarter buildings were less than 25% occupied, some much less. Meanwhile, from 2022 to 2024, the backlog of deferred maintenance on the aging buildings the government owns grew from $216 billion to $370 billion. That's more than 1/3 of $1 trillion it will cost to restore them if we don't sell them. What's worse, aside from paying for useless leases and allowing federal buildings to decay, the Biden administration spent billions on high-end furniture for empty buildings during the pandemic. No one was sitting in those chairs or at those desks. Our witness from Open the Books will testify to that. It is only now, under the Trump administration, that we see a light at the end of the tunnel. This administration is taking historic action on reducing the size of the government, and with it, a significant reduction in the useless office space that is claimed to be essential for the government to operate. GSA has established a goal to reduce the size of the federally owned real estate footprint by 50%. This is a massive real estate auction. The president issued an executive order instructing agencies to update their property inventory and to determine which of their government leased or government-owned spaces they don't need. In just the few months since Inauguration Day, DOGE and the General Services Administration have sold off several federal properties and worked with agencies to eliminate hundreds of unneeded taxpayer-funded office leases. More specifically, they've canceled nearly 700 federal leases of 7.9 million square feet of space, saving taxpayers around $400 million. One of the canceled leases was a nearly $250 million 15-year lease at a luxury office building on Pennsylvania Avenue to house Voice of America and the United States Agency for Global Media. The Biden administration signed the lease late last year, sticking taxpayers with the tab. It's one of the fanciest office buildings in the city. You can see of the building on this poster board. Incredible. Furthermore, this beautiful building had zero broadcasting capabilities, a capability one would think would be essential for a broadcasting media agency. The cost to taxpayers to build out the building with broadcasting capabilities, $130 million. The Biden team wanted to move USAID and Voice of America from this building that we are sitting in today into that luxury space. Instead, the president is shutting down the whole state-run media operation, and taxpayers will be spared a $250 million lease and millions more for renovations and security measures. This is just one example of countless egregious abuses of leases and contracts being paid out across the federal government. Another egregious abuse of taxpayer dollars regarding federal property was the $200 million the FBI received last year for a new headquarters in Maryland. While the FBI was going after the American people, parents at school board meetings, and many others, our federal government gave them hundreds of millions of dollars of American tax dollars for a brand new, beautiful headquarters. Federal agencies shouldn't be maintaining empires at taxpayer expense. That's why GSA, the federal landlord agency driving this reform process, plans to lead by example. Imagine that. It intends to vacate its current headquarters building in downtown DC and co-locate with another agency. Then it will sell the GSA headquarters. Before I close, I'll note that Congress also acted on this front in January. We passed a law requiring federal building occupancy to be tracked and for low occupancy buildings to be sold. But it will take a willing partner in the White House to implement that law and to take other steps to shrink the federal real estate empire. We now have that partner, and I look forward to working with the Trump administration and DOGE to finally right-size the federal real estate footprint.
Next is Ms. Greene from Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for coming before our committee today. In the past 4 years, our nation has been invaded by millions and millions of people who have crossed our border. There's also millions of what's called known gotaways. These are people that our government has no idea where they came from, who they are, what they're going to do in our country. And many of these known gotaways could be criminals. They could be part of the narco cartels. They could be terrorists. We don't know who they are, and there's millions of them here. This country has also been the victim of fentanyl. This is a dangerous chemical that comes from China, is made into pressed pills in Mexico and Canada, and illegally distributed into our country by the cartels. On average, 200 to 300 Americans die every single day from fentanyl. Not die, they're murdered. They're murdered. Americans have also been victims of all types of illegal alien crimes. One family in particular, Laken Riley's family, I know them personally, and her death was absolutely horrific. Jose Ibarra entered the United States illegally on September 8th, 2022, near El Paso, Texas, with his wife and son. He was detained by the U.S. Border Patrol, but soon released due to overcrowding at detention facilities. After his release, he was transported to New York City, arriving around September 15th, 2022. The following summer, he was arrested by New York Police Department and charged with acting in a manner to injure a child. Injure a child. And a driver's license violation. Before an immigration detainer could be issued, NYPD released Ibarra according to ICE. He later, after this release, moved to Athens, Georgia, where he was cited for a misdemeanor for shoplifting in 2023. This guy got arrested multiple times. He was stopped at the border, but he was continually released. Just a few months later, he brutally murdered Laken Riley. Mayor Adams, do you agree that Laken Riley would still be alive today if New York Police Department hadn't released Jose Ibarra after they arrested him?
Despicable crime. And as a former law enforcement officer, I respond to these crimes as a mayor as well. And I believe people like that should be held accountable. And I've advocated to stop this revolving door criminal justice systems like him to come out and hurt innocent people. I wish we would have had the power to prevent that from happening.
Mayor Adams, will you continue sanctuary city policies in your city?
Thus, that policy is by law. I do not make the law. I must operate within the confines of the Constitution and the law.
Mayor Adams, will you advocate to get rid of sanctuary city policies in the city of New York?
I have made it clear on a portion of the sanctuary city policies that I believe we need to alter to prevent crimes like this from taking place.
Federal law under 8 U.S.C. 1324 makes it a crime to knowingly harbor and shield illegal aliens from detection, but your cities refuse to work with ICE detainers to help them find these criminals. I'll go one at a time. Mayor Adams, will you work with ICE in New York City, yes or no?
ICE is part of our criminal justice apparatus, and I will work with my city, state, and federal agencies to keep our cities safe, no matter who they are.
Mayor Johnson, will you work with ICE to protect your city?
We do work with ICE right now, Congresswoman. When they send us information about someone they would like access to, we send them notice when and where we will release them, and they can pick them up. We've done that 1,226 times. We will keep doing it.
Will you end sanctuary city policies?
We think the policies that we have right now allow us to work with ICE and to stop crime, and we'll keep doing that.
Mayor Johnson, will you work with ICE?
Our local law enforcement, Chicago Police Department, we work with federal agents on a variety of issues: drug trafficking, sex trafficking, getting guns off the street, and we will continue to work with federal agents.
Will you stop harboring illegal aliens? Will you end sanctuary city policies?
So the city of Chicago, we do not harbor criminals. We do not harbor undocumented individuals. We comply with all laws.
Mayor Wu, will you work with ICE to protect Americans, legal Americans in your city, and end sanctuary policies?
The Boston Police work with ICE and federal agencies every single day on criminal matters and hold people who are committing crimes accountable.
Chairman, if I may, I'd like to enter for the record, according to the U.S. Constitution, giving aid and comfort to the enemies of the United States is an act of treason, and those that violate that should be
Without
held
objection, so
accountable.
ordered.
Thank you. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
I now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questions. The DOGE website details much of the wasteful spending it hits the brakes on, and it has an incredible list of top hits. Some of the spending is not just embarrassing, but it is funding actually the genital mutilation of our children, forcing the American taxpayers to pay for it. A $620,000 HHS grant for #Transcendent Health, adapting an LGBT plus inclusive teen prevention program for transgender boys. $620,000 from HHS. It's absurd. This is disgusting, and it facilitates a lie. Here's another one. a $2,000 NIH grant for cross-sex steroid therapy and cardiovascular risk in transgender females. This is another absurd grant that was handed out. A $120,000 NIH grant for personalized 3D avatar tool development for measurement of body perception across gender identities. Here's another absurd grant that, again, tells the lie that there's more than two genders. There's only two, male and female. That's it. Something else that the American people should know about, these radical extremist judges that are playing politics from the bench, a judge ruled that this has to be protected. This is a HHS program for gender-affirming care in young people. Again, the only thing that affirms gender is the fact that there's only two sexes, male and female, and the American people should never have to pay for that lie. Ms. DeVito, in your testimony, you talk about so-called failures of DOGE in your opinion. But do you support the federal government funding HHS and NIH studies that promote the genital mutilation of children? Do you support forcing Americans to pay for genital mutilation of children? Yes or no, Ms. DeVito?
Thank you for your question. I think we all agree that the government should work for people.
No, I asked you, do you support genital mutilation of children and the American people having to pay for it? That's a yes or no question.
I think government research is responsible for all sorts of innovations that we enjoy
So you do,
today.
so for the record, you do support the American people paying for top and bottom surgeries of children.
I think
Cutting off the breast of young girls, teenage girls, and castrating teenage boys. You support the American people paying for that.
I think government research is incredibly important.
That's not
to our
research,
overall
Ms.
innovation.
DeVito. That's mutilating kids' bodies before they're old enough to vote, before they're old enough to join the military, before they're old enough to even be adults. That's what you're saying the American people should pay for. Just so you know, Ms. DeVito, and I'm very proud to announce that I have a bill called Protect Children's Innocence Act that will criminalize sex changes on children, and that bill will see a vote on the House floor, and I look forward to my Republican colleagues and hopefully Democrats that come to their senses voting yes for that bill, because it's absolutely repulsive and disgusting, and America voted against that this past election. Sick. Mr. Dickerson, how do we implement cuts and appropriations moving forward to prevent these agencies from ever being able to fund these studies that promote the mutilation of children's bodies ever again?
I think what you need to do is ensure those writers are included in the appropriations bills that are passed, to clarify to the agencies that even though they have never actually received authorization for these, so they shouldn't have actually done it in the first place, but if they need that funding rider to restrict American taxpayer funds for going to those terribly divisive and harmful things.
Yeah, permanently, right?
Exactly.
Thank you. Other egregious abuses of funds, a $10 million Department of Education grant to the Virginia Commonwealth University for faculty workshops on decolonizing the curriculum, a nearly $700,000 National Science Foundation grant to the University of Tennessee for Black and Latinx parents leading reform and advancing racial justice in elementary mathematics, a project that could provide a model for other communities and schools seeking to advance racial justice in mathematics and education. This is insane, absurd, and it's racist in itself. Math is math. A $500,000 EPA grant, Green Jobs, growing a new generation of environmental justice problem solvers. All of this stuff is far left ideology, and the American people should not be paying for it. It looks like my time's up, so with that, I'll yield to the ranking member, Stansbury, for 5 minutes.
I now recognize Ms. Greene from Georgia for 5 minutes questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for clearing that up. There are 19-year-olds that are serving our country and defending our nation. We believe in merit. We believe in people that can do the job. That's why America elected Donald Trump this past election, and part of his campaign was DOGE and Elon Musk. They were on the campaign trail together. As a matter of fact, the last 2 months of the campaign, and America overwhelmingly voted for this effort. I'm so happy that we're talking about cybersecurity, cyber professionals today. Mr. Steyer, in your testimony, you talk about maintaining nonpartisanship as a bedrock principle of civil service. You want to talk about nonpartisanship. Meanwhile, your $24 million nonprofit dedicated to attracting talent for the federal workforce and making the government more effective is funded by some of the most progressive benefactors. This includes the Gates Foundation, the Democracy Fund, and the Ford Foundation. It also hosts galas to honor people like Lisa Monaco and other Biden officials. A goal of your entire organization is essentially de facto job placement to entrench more DEI hires into the federal workforce, the opposite of nonpartisan, apolitical, merit-based civil service. Diversity, equity, inclusion is a huge priority for the partnership as listed on your website. Listed on the website is a framework to integrate the principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion into the partnership's programs, initiatives, and strategies. Since the nonprofit's main initiatives are helping people apply for federal roles and advancing career development in the federal workforce, your nonprofit is aimed at infusing DEI, an inherently partisan practice, into the federal workforce. I worry about this, especially with regards to cybersecurity workforce, who needs high-quality, skill-based positions, such as those serving on DOGE. Cybersecurity is extremely important. It shouldn't be about race. It shouldn't be about sexuality. It shouldn't be about identity. In your testimony, you also expressed concerns that President Trump's administration's recent actions and that they will counter democratic principles. Yet your unwritten goal of entrenching more woke employees into the swamp is the opposite of democratic principles. The Trump administration's actions are the embodiment of democratic principles. This is what the American people want. This is what they voted for. The American people overwhelmingly voted for President Trump in a decisive landslide victory to reform how our government operates. Most importantly, how the federal workforce operates. The mission of your partnership is building a better government and stronger democracy. Building a stronger democracy is allowing the will of the people to take effect, not actively working to oppose it. There have been multiple reports that you were in communication with the officials at the Biden administration prior to President Trump taking office. Is that true?
We run the Center for Presidential Transition, so we've helped the Trump campaign when they were trying to set up their transition operation in 2016. We've helped every administration set up right, both Republican and Democratic. Yes, we've been in contact with the Biden administration. We've had an open door to everybody. If you would like to have the facts, I can provide those to you, but let me know, because the reality is we do honor civil servants, not political appointees. The program that you identified on Lisa Monaco, she was presenting an award as smart political leaders
Thank you,
should.
Mr. Steyer. I'll reclaim my time.
Let me know when you ever want me to.
Did you discuss any strategies for how to prevent President Trump from firing federal workers?
I'm sorry, in what context?
Did you discuss any strategies for how to prevent President Trump from firing federal workers?
In what context? I do not think that it's a good idea to offer the entire workforce non-strategically an opportunity to resign and to press them to do so, because you're going to lose cybersecurity professionals that you don't want to lose. If you want
DEI professionals, are you trying to stop President Trump's administration from firing DEI employees that you placed in the federal government?
We are not engaged in trying to stop anyone from getting fired, but that's not the role we play. What we do say, though, is when civil servants, let me finish the answer.
Well, Mr. Steyer, let me ask you one
question.
I have a few.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, if I'm asked a question, do I get to answer it? Okay, then go ahead.
I'd like to reclaim my time. Thank you, Mr. Steyer.
Thank you.
Does your organization receive taxpayer dollars?
Thanks.
Do we receive taxpayer dollars? We
Yes.
provide services to the government, so we do receive taxpayer dollars.
Right.
On the
I
prior
have $3.4 million right here from the American taxpayers. They're not interested in DEI, Mr. Steyer. They're interested in qualified people. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields. I now
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Ms. Greene.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here today, Mr. Dodaro, and congratulations on your upcoming retirement. You know, for the past 4 years, Democrats have been in control of basically all government functions for the American people. We are at $36 trillion in debt, and the lies are getting to be outrageous. Just listen to one of my colleagues talk about Medicaid. The truth is, for people watching at home, your Medicaid benefits cannot get cut unless the governor of your state and the state cuts your benefits. That's the real truth. Republicans here in Washington, here in Congress, we are not taking away anyone's Medicaid benefits. As a matter of fact, we're trying to cut out improper payments. We're trying to cut out fraud. At my DOGE subcommittee, I had a hearing just 2 weeks ago where we talked about improper payments. It is unbelievable, and I'm sure you would agree, Mr. Dodaro, that the amount of money that's being paid to dead people, to foreigners, to criminals, to terrorists is amounting in the billions and billions of dollars every single year. That's what Democrats and Republicans should be agreeing on. We should be able to come together and say, let's stop this immediately. Another thing that I find outrageous is that Democrats under the Biden administration passed $7.5 billion in spending to build 500,000 electric vehicle charging stations all over the country, whether Americans wanted them or not. But only 8 of these electric vehicle charging stations even got built. I think that should have been in your top 25 list, because where's that money? Honestly, where is that money? That's a great question. Some other things that I'd like to bring up to you here is GOA estimates that total fraud in these programs for unemployment insurance, and you were just talking about it, during the pandemic is at least $60 billion. Americans all over the country will never forget that Democrats shut our country down, shut our businesses down. People got fired. Their churches was closed. All their rights were taken away. And $60 billion from the Department of Labor. The Department of Labor has still not developed an anti-fraud strategy, even though $60 billion is missing. Also, the Medicare program and scale of Medicare spending is innately high risk, with the program spending an estimated $1 trillion in 2024. Of that, in fiscal year 2024, we saw roughly, I'll go back to improper payments again, $54.3 billion in improper payments. And we have Democrats crying over Elon Musk. Are you kidding me? The American people, the polling is out, 72% Democrats and Republicans support DOGE. Support it, 72%. They are not upset about anything that Elon Musk is doing. As a matter of fact, they're happy. They want their 50, they want all these improper payments, all of this waste, they want it back. Now, here's what's really interesting to me. Despite this significant progress made since GOA's 2023 high-risk update, thank you for that, USPS remains unable to fund its services and employee obligations. That's outrageous. Private companies have to be able to fund everything they do, but the United States Postal Service still can't do it. Now, the big one, the Department of Defense Financial Management first appeared on the high-risk list in 1995. 1995. Hey, I graduated from high school in 1992. That's a long time ago. Now, and it remains on this list 28 years later. 28 years later, Congress hasn't fixed this. The Department of Defense hasn't fixed this. And last year, the Pentagon, with a budget of around $850 billion, failed its 7th straight audit. What are we doing? What are we doing? This is not, we should be at the most bipartisan time in history where Republicans and Democrats can come together and say the American people's money is being stolen, it is being lost, it is outright treason to treat the American people this way. Mr. Dodaro, I'm sorry. Let me ask you this question. And I would feel, I can't imagine all the things you all have seen in your work. Do you disagree with the effort of DOGE?
There's probably nobody in the government that wants the government to be more efficient and effective than we do at the GAO, and I do personally. That's our job, to help do that, and we've worked many, many years in order to bring about those changes. So yes. Now, there's a couple of bipartisan things that you touched on that I think you and your committee, this committee, could do. One is we've recommended that they make, in order to stop paying dead people, the Social Security master death file is given to Treasury, but only for a 3-year period. They've already saved millions of dollars. Congress needs to make it permanent. You could save hundreds of millions of dollars if that's done.
Can I get information from your team
Absolutely.
afterward? Okay, that'd be
Absolutely.
great.
And
what about identity verification?
Identity verification needs to be more automated, and we have recommendations for that to occur in the unemployment insurance area. Actually, the unemployment insurance estimate on fraud we made was $100 billion to $135 billion.
Wow.
The other thing that could be done on a bipartisan basis is that the statute of limitations to go after the fraudsters needs to be extended from 5 to 10 years. Congress did it for the Paycheck Protection Program, but not for unemployment insurance. It's almost due to expire. So if Congress doesn't act soon, some of the fraudsters are likely to get away because they'll be outside the statute of limitations. So those things are really important. And I think should be bipartisan.
I agree. I think my time's up. Thank you, Mr. Dodaro.
Thank you. And ranking member pointed out, we've gone over a little bit on the last two on our side. If someone feels the need to go over, I'm keeping up with the time, so we'll make it all work out. Chair recognizes Mr. Subramaniam. Oh, Ms. Brown. Chair recognizes Ms. Brown.
Thank you, Chairman Comer, and thank you to Mr. Dodaro for joining us today. This administration claims to care about rooting out waste.
Chair recognizes Ms. Greene from Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. O'Malley, under your tenure, the Social Security Administration failed to deliver for the American people. On November 8th of last year, your agency announced the Appointment Focused Service, AFS, which directs field offices nationwide to require nearly all services be scheduled by appointment at local offices. While the intent was to reduce in-person wait times, my constituents cannot get through the phone lines to even schedule an in-person appointment. In just the last week, nearly a dozen constituents have contacted my office complaining that when they called to schedule an appointment, they were placed on hold for hours, then ultimately routed to the voicemail where no one answered and no one called them back, and this has been going on and on and on. This is absolutely unacceptable. And the American people deserve to know the root cause of why this policy was implemented to begin with. The short answer is your telework policies. The AFS was put in place to reduce wait times, yet the only reason the wait times were so outrageous to begin with was because there weren't enough staff in the office to reduce the in-person wait times because your staff is at home, not working for the American people. It is reported that your local offices are only staffed at 20 to 30% on any given day. It's kind of hard to have in-person appointments when people are not at the office. No wonder wait times were so long. And you, Commissioner O'Malley, just signed an agreement to make that permanent for the next 4 years of President Trump's administration, which is more failure, but that's your fault. And by the way, Commissioner, I reached out to you last August. This is the letter that I sent to you, dated August 1st, 2024, requesting an in-person meeting with you to discuss some of the serious issues that my constituents in Northwest Georgia are constantly having. But you never responded to me, Mr. O'Malley. I never got a phone call. I never got a letter back. And that's clearly, maybe you were enjoying the telework policies yourself instead of doing the actual job. Or possibly it's because you were too busy drinking with the union members that you were negotiating with instead of negotiating against on behalf of the American people. Now, Mr. O'Malley, right before you resigned as Social Security Administrator, you signed an agreement with the American Federation of Government Employees on November 27th, 2024. Now, remember, 2 weeks before that, as I mentioned, you were partying with AFGE members in Florida, but you weren't interested in calling me back or were even bothering to return a letter when I wanted to talk to you about very serious issues that my constituents were having. You see, as Republicans, we fully support making sure that every single American receives their benefits from Social Security. You Democrats like to lie about us. We are going to make sure that every single person that paid in gets every single penny that they deserve, that they paid in, it will come out and back to them. That's what's important to us, actually working for the American people. Now, Mr. O'Malley, I'd like to ask you another question. Since you're very interested in being DNC chair, you are, after all, a lifelong Democrat politician. I don't even know if you had a job in the real world, but you have been an elected politician for years. Mr. O'Malley, you're also a Catholic, are you not? You're also a Catholic, are you not?
I am.
Do you serve God or do you serve the Democrat Party?
I serve God.
Okay, then Mr.
Mr.
O'Malley.
Chairman, as
Mr.
a Roman
O'Malley,
Catholic, I take offense at the suggestion that somebody has to choose between God and their service to country as a Catholic.
Mr. O'Malley, will you be supporting the murder of the unborn up until the day of birth like your party does? As DNC chair, will you be supporting the murder of innocent unborn people? Is that in line with your faith in God and the Catholic Church?
I trust the judgment of women and doctors over the judgment of government.
No, do you trust God's judgment? Do you trust God that he loves and has created every single human being? Do you support the murder of unborn children? And are you going to uphold that evil practice that the Democrat Party wants to continue? You see, abortions, over 95% of them are unintended pregnancies. They use abortions as birth control. So are you going to continue the birth control practice of murdering the unborn children as chair of the DNC? Will that be a policy you'll be supporting?
I am pro-choice, and I trust the judgment of women and their doctors over the judgments of government.
Well, thank you for letting God know where you stand with the murder of the
I talk
unborn.
to God every day.
Yeah, well, you might want to talk to him a little bit more,
Yeah.
Mr. O'Malley, because you're definitely in the wrong. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Chairwoman Greene from the state of Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My Democrat colleagues are reacting with manufactured outrage over Elon Musk and the DOGE team going in and cleaning up the federal government. They're saying the American people did not vote for this, but I would like to correct that record. On July 13th, when President Trump was shot in Butler, Pennsylvania, Elon Musk got behind President Trump and he endorsed him. And then on August 19th of 2024, this is before the election, Elon Musk posted on his own account, "I am willing to serve," and that right there says DOGE. This was not something that was created after the election. It is no surprise to the American people. As a matter of fact, the Department of Government Efficiency was a key part of President Trump's campaign, and President Trump campaigned over and over again on DOGE and Elon Musk helping him. As a matter of fact, right here on Rolling Stones, which is very far left, by the way, Trump says he would give Elon Musk a top role in his administration. Again, this was on August 20th, 2024, well before the election. This was no surprise to the American people. The American people love DOGE so much. They love the concept of saving the federal government, saving Americans, and putting America first, cutting the waste and the spending, cutting down the size of the federal government. They love it so much, they voted for President Trump and elected him with an overwhelming victory. He won the popular vote, 312 electoral college votes. It's the Democrats that are the ones that are still lost on their message, and their message is a failure, and the American people spoke out about it. As the national debt approaches $36.5 trillion, our children and our grandchildren's futures are being sacrificed at the altar of wasteful government spending and corruption. With my new subcommittee on DOGE this Congress, we are going to dig deep on the wasteful spending and corrupt bureaucracies that have plagued our nation for far too long. We will make recommendations to address these problems, and we will make sure the American people know exactly what is being done with their hard-earned tax dollars. After all, this is what they voted for. Governor Reynolds, in Iowa, the state legislature passed a bill in 2023 that lowered the number of cabinet-level departments from 37 down to just 16. So I'd like to ask you, did this make the Iowa government more efficient or less efficient?
More efficient.
I'm not surprised. Is the Iowa government still able to provide all the services your constituents require of you?
We're actually doing a better job of it and putting more money into the programs or returning it back to the taxpayers.
Amazing. It sounds like DOGE has already worked in Iowa. Has your state lost money or saved money since reorganizing its government?
$217 million, surpassing our 4-year projection in the first 18 months, and that's conservative. We're going to continue to see savings, and that's how I'm going to continue to reduce the tax burden on our taxpayers.
That is incredible. That's what all of America wants. So how do you think the federal government can translate what Iowa has done to the national level? You've already achieved it in your state. How can we replicate that?
You're doing it by bringing the private sector in, having them take a look at the inefficiencies in government, look at the systems, look at the duplication, look at the unaccountability. There's no transparency. There's no metrics. There's no data that they can point to. We're standing up Iowa DOGE. We want to be a partner in that because I think it's really important that the federal government and the state government and the local governments work together to really implement transformational change. This is an incredible opportunity. I have so much respect for President Trump to put this initiative forward. He received an undeniable mandate in this last election, as did we. We now have supermajorities in both the House and the Senate, the governor's office, and an entire Republican delegation that we've sent out to Washington, D.C. We did just what President Trump does. We told Iowans what we were going to do, and we followed through with it. And that is what Americans expect, and that is why 77 million people said that President Trump is who we want to restore America's greatness.
I absolutely agree with you, Governor Reynolds. Thank you. Mr. Schatz, in all your years at your organization, can you give some of the most egregious examples of government spending you've seen? And I know that's hard to come up with a few because there's a lot.
I talked earlier about broadband programs. It's not necessarily a wasteful expenditure, meaning something isn't trying to be. There were 133 broadband programs in 15 agencies. There are people that are still not connected, I am sure, also in Iowa. $42 billion for the BEAD program. Not a penny has been spent. We want people to be connected to the Internet. It's critical for our future. But unless those programs are consolidated and someone figures out which ones are working best, we're not going to achieve that objective. It seems simple, but again, the problem here has been, as it usually is, something isn't working, spend more money, create another program, don't take the time to look at how it's working, and that's what DOGE and your subcommittee is going to do. We're happy to help any way we can, by the way.
Thank you, Mr. Schatz. And you're right. Under the Biden administration, they actually canceled contracts with Starlink, which are far less expensive, and then never built out the infrastructure for broadband. True failure for the American people. Giant waste of money. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back. 5 minutes of questions. Ms. Marr, your public statements and social media posts reflect left-wing ideology and blatant opposition to free speech. After all, you were the head of Wikipedia for many years, which is a platform that doesn't tell the truth. Let's walk through some of your statements so the public can understand your personal views. You said your fellow Americans just elected Donald Trump as president again this past November. You called him a deranged racist and sociopath. You posted on X that America is addicted to white supremacy. It's appalling. You've publicly chastised using the phrase boy and girl, which you said erases the language for non-binary people. There's only 2 genders, by the way. Ms. Marr, the federal funding that your outlet receives comes from all American taxpayer dollars, not just from your viewers who support such statements as these. Let me inform you, and that your federal funding is also paid for by the other half of the country, the 77 million Americans who voted for President Trump, someone you called a deranged, racist sociopath. Ms. Marr, many find your pro-censorship and anti-free speech views more concerning than your politics. The only speech you like seems to be speech that you agree with. In 2021, you called the First Amendment the #1 challenge in American journalism because it makes it hard to crack down on bad information. You said in a TED Talk that our reverence for the truth might be a distraction. You've also expressed support for deplatforming individuals you view as fascist. Who do you think should be charged with cracking down on so-called bad information? Is it NPR? Is it the government? Is it you, Ms. Marr?
Congresswoman, Madam Chair, thank you so much for the opportunity to address this. I know.
Do you is it up to you and NPR to crack down on bad information or decide the truth? Answer the question, yes or no, Ms. Marr.
Absolutely not. I'm a very strong believer in free speech, and I believe that more speech.
Your public statements say otherwise. Ms. Marr, in 2021, when speaking at an Atlantic Council event, you said that when you were CEO of Wikipedia, you took a very active approach to disinformation and misinformation. During the COVID pandemic and the 2020 election, you said you censored information through conversations with government. Which governments were those, Ms. Marr? The Biden administration, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Wikipedia never censored any information.
These are your public statements, Ms. Marr. Ms. Marr, are you familiar with Section 399B of the Communications Act? It prohibits non-commercial education broadcast stations, NCEs, from airing commercials on behalf of for-profit entities. The FCC recently opened an investigation into the underwriting announcements and related policies of NPR and PBS. Does NPR air commercials for for-profit entities, Ms. Marr? Yes or no?
Madam Chair, we are in full compliance with the FCC's inquiry and will continue to cooperate.
I remind you, you're under oath, and violations of the Communications Act comes with a fine up to $10,000 and possibly up to a year in prison. Does PBS air for-profit commercials, Ms. Kruger?
We air underwriting announcements, and we believe we are in full compliance with the FCC, and we look forward to delivering the material required in this part of this investigation.
We look forward to that, too. I'm assuming you're concerned, both of you are concerned about this, and that's why you brought so many attorneys with you today. Ms. Kruger, using taxpayer subsidies, PBS funded Independent Lens to make documentaries for part of your programming. In 2016, Real Boy was aired about a trans teen navigating adolescent sobriety and the ramification of his gender identity. In 2022, the same series aired Our League, in which a trans woman comes to her old school Ohio bowling league in a story about transition. Then in 2024, Racist Trees was aired, telling a story of how in Palm Springs, a black neighborhood fights to remove a divisive wall of trees. Do you think PBS needs to fund ridiculous material such as this that the taxpayers are having to pay for?
These are documentary films that are point-of-view pieces that are part of our primetime schedule for adults.
And parents and adults don't trust that type of programming.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I ask a unanimous consent.
I recognize myself for closing remarks. The United States is $36 trillion in debt. In fiscal year 2024, the government spent over $1.8 trillion more than it took in. And in fiscal year 2025, the interest on our debt is expected to exceed $1 trillion. As we continue investigating waste, fraud, and abuse, and we can look no further than the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the LGBTQ indoctrination of our children, the systematic racism narrative, and the support for censorship being pushed by the heads of NPR and PBS are just several of the many abuses of taxpayer dollars. And if you are one of the select few who might support such content, you can personally support and fund it with your own money through private donations, because the reality is the United States of America is broke and can't afford it. And after all, PBS and NPR are already fundraising off of this committee hearing. The American people are closely following along today in this long-awaited hearing to hear the case for why Americans' hard-earned tax dollars should continue for public broadcasting. I think from what we have heard here today, the American people will not continue to allow such propaganda to be funded through the federal government with their hard-earned tax dollars. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting that we give over $500 million to no longer serves the public. It serves a narrow audience of wealthy, liberal elites who are out of touch with everyday Americans. Not only have the times changed and the American people who once needed these outlets can now access the news anywhere at any time, but the content that is being put out through these state-sponsored outlets is so radical, it is brainwashing the American people and, more significantly, American children with un-American, anti-family, pro-crime fake news. The American people do not support their taxpayer dollars going to NPR articles like, "How is sex determined? Scientists say it's complicated," which discusses how biological sex is not limited to male or female. Or another article about how stories on crime are rife with misinformation and racism. Or about how birds and trees are racist. Over a 7-month period, the Media Research Center discovered the PBS NewsHour gave over 90% of the airtime to the left on gender ideology stories, 90%. As mentioned earlier, PBS was the outlet that featured the child predator drag queen on the education show for kids ages 3 to 8 years old. And to clarify the record, because our witness, Ms. Kerger, lied under oath and said it wasn't featured on PBS, this show was aired on PBS on April 1st, 2021, and we will take a look at this video right now. We're using a TV today because our audio system is having problems. Let's go ahead and watch this video.
Swish, swish, swish. The shoulders on the drag queen go shimmy, shimmy, shimmy. Shimmy, shimmy, shimmy. Shimmy, shimmy, shimmy. Blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah. The mouth of the drag queen goes blah, blah, blah. All through the town. So, get your singing voices.
The hips go swish, swish, swish. The shoulders go shimmy, shimmy, shimmy. That's repulsive. That's not what children ages 3 to 8 should ever be watching. A grown biological man posing as a woman. And by the way, Ms. Kerger, that was aired on April 1st, 2021. And then something happened. It wasn't an accident. And it wasn't just for a brief time that it was up. It was aired April 1st, and then somehow it expired May 24th. Later on, it was taken down. I wonder why. Wonder why that was taken down. Another egregious example includes back in 2010, PBS's Travis Smiley stated that Christians blow up people every single day. Haven't seen that ever happen in my life. And today, if you look on NPR's website, there is still zero mention of any negative coverage of any Democrat today. And trust us, there are more than plenty of examples to pull from. How about a member from this committee making fun of the governor of Texas for having a disability and living his life in a wheelchair? Ms. Marr. From headlines to podcasts to documentaries to children's programming, NPR and PBS have all but abandoned their promise to deliver unbiased, nonpartisan, and fact-based reporting. The American people have woken up to this nonsense and blatant disregard for truth, and truth matters. And they will not put up with it any longer. Contrary to the beliefs of the head of NPR, Ms. Marr, truth is not subjective. It's actually very important. And there are not multiple truths. There's just one. For a civilization to exist, objective truth must exist. It must be embraced. It must be protected. It is not a distraction, and despite many attempts to whitewash it, truth will prevail. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting is using taxpayer dollars to actively suppress the truth, suppress diverse viewpoints, and produce some of the most outlandish, ludicrous content. After listening to what we've heard today, we will be calling for the complete and total defund and dismantling of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Here's how it works in America every single day, private businesses operate on their own without government funding. We believe that you all can hate us on your own dime. With that and without objection, all members have 5 legislative days within which to submit materials and additional written questions for witnesses, which will be forwarded to the witnesses. If there is no further business without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned. You know, something else we're not going to tolerate is crime. On August 11th, President Trump announced major steps to address the out-of-control crime in the district. Thank God, because this is my 5th year in Congress, and living in D.C. and working here has been a nightmare. It is. The crime is ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. And let's talk about some of that. Since President Trump thankfully brought in the National Guard, carjackings have decreased by 87%. Nearly 1,200 people have been arrested, including known members of MS-13 and Tren de Aragua. Those are both foreign terrorist organizations. By the way, many of them came across the border while Democrats controlled this country in the past 4 years. Federal law enforcement seized nearly 120 firearms and busted a drug trafficking ring attempting to smuggle fentanyl, PCP, and cocaine into D.C. A joint effort by ICE and MPD arrested an illegal alien previously charged with sex crimes against a child. D.C. went 12 days without a single homicide. Can you imagine that that's something that the National Guard had to be here to do? It's unbelievable to anybody that is right-minded. U.S. Attorney Pirro reported that 88% of arrests made between the start of the federal deployment on August 11th and August 25th resulted in charges being filed. This is substantially higher than in 2024, where the Biden-appointed U.S. Attorney Matthew Graves charged suspects only 57% of the time. That's because he was busy chasing down MAGA grandmas that went into the Capitol. So I've got a simple question for you. Mayor Bowser, do you prioritize criminals or the victims?
I prioritize law-abiding D.C. residents, visitors, and workers.
So that would be law-abiding citizens and victims. Do you support the police, Mayor Bowser?
Yes.
Mr. Mendelson, do you prioritize criminals or victims of criminals?
I believe in swift and certain justice. And
no, I asked you either one. Victims of criminals, of crime, or the criminals themselves. Which one do you prioritize?
As I understand the question, victims.
Victims. Do you support the police, Mr. Mendelson?
Absolutely.
Okay, Mr. Schwab, I'll ask you the same questions.
Unfortunately, hurt people. So sometimes victims are victims one day and
so
are
you
perpetrators
prioritize the
day.
criminals, is that what you're saying, over victims of crime?
I prioritize making up my city as safe as it can possibly be.
I'll take that as criminals. Do you support police, Mr. Schwab?
Of course, we work very closely with MPD every day.
Mr. Jackson, the same questions for you.
Definitely prioritize victims, and I stand with the 24 states that are suing the Trump administration for withholding $1 billion in victim service funds.
So you're against cleaning up crime in D.C. Thank you for that. I've got an article here. The D.C. police union head is the biggest cheerleader of Trump's D.C. police takeover. So the police here in the district support the efforts and the help from the president. However, I've got a quote here from Mr. Mendelson. You call the union celebrating Trump's takeover just despicable. You literally attack the police in your statements. You're calling
That's not correct.
the union supporting the president and the National Guard here, helping them every day on the streets. You're quoted as saying that's just despicable.
You're taking that out of context. I criticized the president of the FOP because he is a liar.
Oh, so you are against the police.
No,
Thank you for clearing that up.
no.
Also, I have
Mr. Chairman,
one last thing,
The
Mr.
president
Chairman.
of the FOP, not the police.
I reclaim my time. Lastly here, Mr.
Gentlelady's
Mendelson.
time's expired.
You
Gentlelady's time's expired.
recognize myself for 5 minutes of questioning. For years, anybody who questioned weather modification was labeled crazy or a conspiracy theorist. Now we've learned that they've been doing it for decades. And not only is it a multi-billion-dollar industry, the government has invested a lot of Americans' hard-earned tax dollars into it. They've been forced to spin it, and apparently it is now the only way we are going to save humanity. However, let's look at the risk. According to GAO, injecting a cloud with silver iodide increases precipitation anywhere from 0 to 20%. It could be even more, but the truth is that we really don't know for certain. The questions that are asked is, can you control the exact amount of precipitation that a cloud will produce if it is injected with silver iodide or another cloud seeding agent? Can you control where the precipitation is going to land with 100% certainty? Can you say that it will not cause or enhance flooding with 100% certainty? Is there any way to measure with absolute certainty the effectiveness of seeding a cloud? Do we know with 100% certainty how much rain a cloud would have produced if it had not been seeded? And lastly, did the American people ever get to have a say in any of this? The truth is that there's absolutely no way to measure the effectiveness of cloud seeding. But something else that needs to be known is the American people deserve to know that there is very little rules and regulations over this. These companies that perform cloud seeding and other types of geoengineering projects have to fill out forms from NOAA, and they have to list what agents they're using. And there is a category that simply says other, and they don't have to even fill out what other means. And I think that's extremely concerning. But I'd like to talk a little bit more about solar geoengineering. It's completely different. More consequential approach to human manipulation of the planet's climate. One geoengineering company called Make Sunsets injects aerosol into the atmosphere to reflect sunlight back into space. I want to show you their frequently asked questions page on their website. Mr. Pilkey, it says here, it says, what are you doing? It says, we're using balloons to launch reflective clouds into the stratosphere. And then it says, why? It says, unless we reflect sunlight, tens of millions of people will die, and 20% of species may go extinct. We're using the most effective way to reflect sunlight that we found and can afford to deploy. Mr. Pilkey, is it true that tens of millions of people will die if they don't do this?
There's nothing you can find in the IPCC or other scientific literature to suggest that's a consequence. Sometimes those stark claims are made to try to scare people into other forms of action on climate change. So if you don't change energy policy, we're going to mess up the stratosphere, and that's how I interpret that.
Sounds like a major threat for their company to make money. They said, how long do Make Sunsets clouds stay in the sky? Depending on the altitude and latitude at which we release them, anywhere between 6 months and 3 years. They also say, is it legal? They say, yes, it falls under the Weather Modification Act. Then they have a question here, Mr. Marks. I would like you to stop doing this. And they say, and we would live a future with breathable air and no wet bulb events for generations to come. Convince us there's a more feasible way to buy us time to get there, and we'll stop. We'll happily debate anyone on this. Mr. Martz, they don't think that the rest of us have a say in this. How do you think? What do you think about that?
Well, I think that the claim that the air is not going to be breathable is just patently ridiculous. Carbon dioxide, although it is a greenhouse gas, and yes, I do agree that some of the warming, at least, that we've seen in the last 100 years is probably due to CO2 emissions. There's no indication that the air is going to become unbreathable. It makes up 0.04% by dry air volume of Earth's atmosphere. And submariners in the Navy are subject to the concentrations exceeding 5,000 parts per million and are just fine.
Well, let me ask another question, Mr. Martz. You know, it's sulfur, right, that is put into the air. Is there health consequences for people, especially like after volcanic eruptions? Is there health consequences to that type of injection into the atmosphere?
Well, sulfur dioxide, if it's injected into the stratosphere, obviously it blocks out solar radiation, and so that would potentially, that could, if it's implemented on a large enough scale over a long period of time, it could reduce crop yields because obviously plants need sunlight to grow. They need water and CO2, just basic photosynthesis. And there's also concerns that if it gets into the troposphere, it could create acid rain, and that is called acid deposition into the soil. And that makes it hard for plants to obviously to grow, and that harms plant and animal life as well. Obviously,
Mr. Martz, I'm out of time. Thank you very much. I now recognize